I present to you Mr. Joe Gorder.
Well, good evening to Dr. Meyer and the faculty here at Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here with you. Graduates, congratulations to you and your families. It's truly an honor for me to be here with such a fine group of called servants of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Now tonight what I'm going to do is talk to you about two things. And this is really based on my experience. I'd like to give you a few suggestions on dealing with some of the challenges that are going to be facing you as you go forward. And then the second thing is to talk to you a little bit about my walk as a layman and the role that my pastors have played in my life. Now for years that's a Texas word. For years you all have been busy with your studies and your ministry activities, but you're getting ready to leave this very safe and encouraging place. And on one hand, it's very exciting, but perhaps on the other hand, you might just be a little bit anxious. It takes courage to leave the things that we're familiar with. In addition to courage, though, I would tell you that you guys are going to need to be alert. You see, because things are going to change for you in a very material way. The world is going to speed up. The turns are going to be much, much sharper, and the hazards are going to be greater and a lot more frequent. You see, the world challenges us minute by minute, and we all have our weaknesses, and we're vulnerable. And you guys are going to be targets. Now, unfortunately, in my walk, I've seen a lot of faithful people, including pastors, lose their way with very serious negative consequences. I have seen ministries lost, I have seen congregations hurt and disillusioned, and I've seen relations broken. So let me give you 3 suggestions that may help, number 1, protect you, but number 2, make your ministry a little bit more productive. The first is to humbly accept the fact that life is too complicated for you to control, that you're not omnipotent, and you're not invulnerable. This is going to lead you then to an absolute trust in Jesus. So begin your day by asking the Lord to guide you. As you plan your day, plan a day that leads to excellence. Don't just show up for work and step into activities and get busy. You've got to plan your day. And then in planning that day, as you execute those activities, you've got to be very, very sure that the interference that the world's going to throw at you doesn't distract you from accomplishing those things that are really important to your ministry. Now, by trusting the Lord and by planning, you're going to have great comfort. Number 1, that He's got control. Number 2, that you know where you're going. And number 3, that it's going to result in you giving God your absolute best. The second thing I would tell you to do is seek wise and trustworthy counsel and then listen to them. Be sure that you don't get yourself isolated, and be sure that the people that you surround yourself with are those that are courageous enough to be honest with you and to hold you accountable. This is going to help protect you from being blindsided by the things that the world's going to throw at you. The third suggestion I'd make for you is to check your ego. You may in fact be the smartest person in the room, but if you are, don't let anyone know. Remember that you're here to serve. You are going to have authorities over groups. So in those groups, it's your job to empower them, to guide them, and encourage them to serve alongside you. And based on my experience, successful teams have been those made up of individuals who have gotten over themselves. So please be sure that you focus on maintaining your humility. Now let me transition and talk to you a minute about my walk as a layman and the role the pastors have played in my life. And I'm going to do this sequentially, so you're going to get a bit of the 30-year life history for Joe Gorder. Well, St. Louis, you may or may not know, is my hometown. I was born in the shadows of Concordia Seminary at St. Mary's Hospital across the street. I became a Lutheran when I was 8 years old. My sister Nancy and I attended Concord Lutheran School and Grace Lutheran Church in Pagedale. As a young man, I wanted to be a pastor, but the call never came. So I attended the University of Missouri St. Louis. I graduated, got a job, and then within 6 months found myself living in Texas. And it was there that I met my wife, Lacey, a beautiful, godly woman who happened to be a Baptist. That's not necessarily a bad thing, I guess, huh? Anyway, Lacey and I dated for a while, and as our relationship got more serious, her parents were a little concerned that she was marrying a Lutheran. So, her mother went and asked her pastor. His name was Brother Odine Puckett from First Baptist Church in Natchez, Mississippi. Anyway, she asked Brother Puckett if it was okay for her to marry a Lutheran, to which he responded, "It's better that she marry a good Lutheran than a bad Baptist." I've thought about that a lot too, who knows? So, for the last 30 years, Lacey and I have lived in San Antonio. We've been members of Concordia Lutheran Church. So, how did we get there? Well, I work for a company called Diamond Shamrock, and I'm going to tell you these company names because this is relevant. Worked for Diamond Shamrock, and I was transferred by them in 1985 to San Antonio. As new residents of San Antonio, we started looking around for a new LCMS home, and one Sunday we visited Concordia, and Dr. Merkins was preaching, and he was a very good preacher. And so we enjoyed the worship. We must have filled out a visitor's card because on Monday or Tuesday of that next week, the phone rang and it was Dr. Merkins asking if we enjoyed the worship, number one, and number two, could he initiate our letter of transfer, which we, of course, agreed to. He was something. Anyway, Dr. Merkins was the pastor in my life that connected the dots between the scriptures, my faith, and my profession. And as a young businessman, this was critically important to me. He also enlisted me in more active participation in church. So it started with me being an usher and then an elder, and then I taught a Bible class, and then ultimately I became chairman of the congregation. So what you need to remember, Dr. Merkins was a man of action, and he enlisted active participation of his members. And he realized that productive people were busy people. And so if you wanted the productive people involved in ministry, you were going to have to go to them and ask them directly. If you just went into the room and said, "Can I have volunteers?" you're going to get a lot of hands. But that may or may not be the people that you really want to get involved. So be sure that you make it a point to go at people directly and ask them. I think you'll find that productive people will be happy to serve. So let me flash forward from 85 to 1995. Dr. Merkins retired. I'm serving as congregational chairman, and I was very active in the call process that brought Bill Thompson to Concordia. At this point in my life, my spiritual life was very strong. Concordia's ministry was vibrant, but professionally my life was burdened with contentment. So on one hand, I had this sense of completion that my work as a layman was somewhat complete, but on the other hand, I had these feelings of restlessness in my professional life. Coincidentally, I received a call from a former boss who had been a mentor, and he offered me an outstanding job. So Lacey and I prayed about it, and we thought it was God's will, and so we accepted the position. Well, it certainly didn't work out as we had planned. In March of 1996, so about 6 months later, we were absolutely miserable. So one Sunday after church, we went up to the altar, shared the situation with our pastor, we prayed about it, and to make a long story short, by the next Thursday, I had received a call from the CEO of Diamond Shamrock, a Lutheran man by the name of Roger Hemminghouse, inviting me to come back to work there. Now, you'd think this would be pretty simple since we were miserable, but Lacey and I actually thought that it was God's hand guiding us, to make this change in career path. And so we didn't want to frustrate his plan for our lives, so we weren't certain. We prayed about it extensively. That night was a night I didn't sleep, but it's the night I remember God speaking to me most directly, and really what he said was, "Listen, I don't know what you don't understand about this situation. You're miserable. You're not serving me in any way. I had this man call you to come back. What don't you get?" So anyway, sometimes it takes a 2x4 for me. Anyway, it was very clear, and so we returned to Diamond Shamrock. Now let me take you forward to 1999. Diamond Shamrock merged with a company called Ultramar, became UDS. That led to Roger Hemminghouse's retirement. A change of leadership led to a change of culture, and I didn't fit, so I made another job change. I will tell you guys that this led to the darkest period of my life, spiritually and professionally. Concordia, this is 2001. Concordia was in a crisis that led, there were some terrible things that happened, led to our senior pastor stepping down. And the guys that I had partnered with when I left this company, UDS, didn't share my ethics, my morals, or my faith. And so every day was a test. Now, it was dark for me, but God put a couple of bright points of light in my life. The first was when he called Bill Tucker to be our pastor at Concordia. And the second was the company UDS was acquired by a company called Valero Energy. And this was in 2001. Valero Energy CEO was a gentleman by the name of Bill Greehey, who happened to be a Missouri Synod Lutheran, who happened to attend Concordia Lutheran Church and had been pastored by Dr. Merkins for years. So, to Bill Tucker's credit, when he came to San Antonio, he developed a close relationship with Dr. Merkins where they counseled each other and visited about issues. Well, in one of those visits, Bill told Doc that Joe was struggling and that one of the companies he'd identified to go to work for was Valero. So, I mentioned that Dr. Merkins was a man of action, right? So he picked up the phone and he called Greehey. And he said, hey, you need to talk to this guy, Joe Gorder, which Bill Greehey agreed to do, and I hadn't been able to get through myself. So I went in to visit Bill Greehey. Things went well. I thought I was going to get a job offer, but that hiring process was so deliberate. So I found myself getting more desperate and more challenged by the day. There was a particular day I was driving down Highway 281 in San Antonio, screaming at God at the top of my lungs that he needed to get me out of this situation because I was at my wit's end and I couldn't deal with it anymore. I no sooner sat down at my desk, the phone rang, and Valero was calling to offer me a job. Now, today, I serve as the chairman and CEO of Valero. So from 2002 through 2014, when an appointment was made, I've had a lot of turns and twists in the road. It's been a challenge. And people, as you know, with any company, we have our politics. And people would come to me and say, Joe, you know, we really want you to run the company, but this guy's out maneuvering you, and so on. So I would always tell them, listen, let me tell you something. My view is that if it's God's plan, it's going to happen. And if it's God's plan that it doesn't happen, I'm fine with that too. But I'm really good with it. And I really believe that. And let me tell you why I was so firm in that belief. If I flash you back to 1996, God gave me a special gift that I didn't recognize at that time. And I've never really talked about this, certainly not with any large group. But he gave me this special gift. We were in the middle of a capital campaign. Lacey and I were chairing the campaign. And one Sunday they asked me to give a testimony, which I did. And it was about the period where I left Diamond Shamrock and came back, and about God's hand in it. 2 weeks later, a gentleman by the name of Bill Knippa, Mr. Knippa, came up. And yes, his son is a LCMS pastor in Austin. Anyway, his father, Mr. Knippa, came up to visit with me. And he said, Joe, I had a dream about you last night. And I said, really, Mr. Knippa, what was that about? And he said, I dreamed that you were running Valero Energy. Now, I said, well, Mr. Knippa, you must be mistaken, you see, because I don't work for Valero Energy. I work for Diamond Shamrock. We're competitors, so I really don't see how that would happen. And he paused and thought for a moment, and he said, nope, I'm sure it was Valero Energy. So, what do I want you to take away from this little mini autobiography here? Well, first of all, my life has been filled with those twists and turns and hazards that I described to you earlier. And I have wrecked more than a few times. My walk with my pastors hasn't been casual. It has been an intimate and transformative walk for me. My pastors have prepared me. They've given me the opportunity to grow. They've encouraged me. They've held me accountable. They've counseled me, and they've prayed with me. My pastors were men of action that helped me in more ways than you could possibly imagine, and they've helped others too. God used my pastors to show me his way for my life. Now I'm going to wrap this up with a question for you. What kind of pastor do you want to be, and what kind of relationships do you want to have with your congregational members? This is a very important question, and you need to think about it. So with that, I'm going to leave you with a word of encouragement. Go get them, okay? Be sure that Lacey and I are going to be praying for you, that your ministry be a blessing, and that God keeps you safe. And with that, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here tonight, and I wish you God's blessings.